Hello students. In this chapter, we are going to study about Indian economy from the period 1950 to 1990. I hope you all remember that we studied about effect of British rule on Indian economy in the last chapter. Now this chapter deals with how Indian economy handled itself after British left India in 1947. So after British left India in 1947, the first question to our policymaker was to choose the right type of economic structure. As we all know that economic structure is the backbone of any economy. So choosing right type of economic structure was a very big question. Economic makers of India studied economic systems of various countries in order to arrive at the conclusion. There were three types of economic structures available before our policymaker: capitalist, socialist, and mixed economy. Each social structure has its own merits or demerits. For example, capitalism, an economic structure in which price mechanism rules the market. Also, here all factors of production are run, owned, and controlled by the private sector. This system did not appeal Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru as it ignores the social welfare and it is only based on promoting private profit. Another alternative was socialism, in which all factors of production are owned by the government or public sector. Though this system appealed Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, but it was not possible for a democratic country like India to transfer entire property in favor of government. Thus, India adopted the mixed path, that is, we adopted the mixed economic system in which we have a strong public sector with a private sector in which both market as well as command economy works. Now, after deciding upon the mixed economic system, the next step was to start the planned development. Planning is an important part of any economic development because without plan, an economy cannot develop. Now, what is a plan? A plan is a document that spells out how resources of a nation should be put to use. A plan has goals, specific as well as general. There could be no plan without a goal. So planning in India started in 1950 when Planning Commission was established with Prime Minister as the chairman of Planning Commission. This started the era of 5-year plans in India with first 5-year plan which started in year 1951. As I told you earlier that plans have goals. Now, in India also, our planning system specified four goals to be achieved, that is growth, equity, modernization, and self reliance. Now, let's have a look at these goals in detail. The first and foremost goal of our planning was growth. I hope you all know what do we mean by growth. Growth refers to an increase in country's capacity to produce more goods and services. And how do we measure it? We measure it with the help of GDP. A sustained increase in GDP indicates economic growth of a country. Now, along with growth, what we required was modernization. Modernization has two aspects. Firstly, we should use new technology, and secondly, it also requires us to change our social outlook. That is, both men and women should be given equal rights. There should be no discrimination against anyone at workplace or even in the society. Coming to the third goal, self reliance. This goal was very important for a country like India who just got independence from the colonial rule. Self reliance states that a country should be dependent on itself for the development. That is, we should avoid import of those goods which can be produced domestically. Thus, India adopted the path of self reliance for first 7 5-year plans as it did not want to be dependent on any other country. Last but not the least, a very important goal, equity. Equity means that benefits of economic prosperity should be enjoyed equally by both rich as well as poor. The cartoon shown here shows that rich is having most of the wealth whereas poor don't don't have resources. So this does not serve the purpose of equity. Equity means that fruits of growth should be shared equally by rich as well as poor. So these were the four planning objectives that were there in the Indian economy. Now, what was the step 3? Step 3 was to implement these objectives in different fields. So now let's see which all policies were adopted by Indian economy with reference to agriculture, industry and trade. Starting with the first and foremost important sector, agriculture. As it was stated earlier as well, that agriculture is the backbone of Indian economy. At the time of independence, about 75% of country's population was dependent on agriculture directly or indirectly. However, there were certain problems with this sector when British left India. They were faulty land settlement system like Zamindari system, low productivity as we did not have access to modern technology and infrastructure, dependence on monsoon, and a huge dependence on other countries to import food grains. So, the issue was to ensure growth and equity in the agricultural sector. The issue of equity was resolved with the help of land reforms. Two main land reforms were undertaken. The first one was abolition of zamindari system and the second one was ceiling on land holdings. In the case of zamindari system, zamindars were removed and ownership of land was given to farmers. This system was successful up to an extent as some 200 lakh tenants come in the direct contact with government. However, in many areas, zamindars continue to own large land due to loopholes in the legislation. Ceiling of land holding means fixing a maximum limit above which a land cannot be held by anyone. This system, however, also failed because of loopholes in the legislation as people transferred land in the name of their family members and continued to own large pieces of land. However, in Kerala and West Bengal, these land reforms were successful as their governments were committed to giving land to tiller. Now, the second issue of growth was resolved by Green Revolution. You all very well know the Green Revolution period in Indian economy, which was there in 1960, in which production of food grain increased due to use of high yielding variety of seeds along with fertilizers and pesticides. In the case of Green Revolution, there was a use of packaged inputs, that is HYV seeds used with fertilizers, pesticides and other irrigation facilities. Scientific rotation of crops was adopted, credit packages were given and minimum support price was announced. Minor irrigation works were also undertaken during Green Revolution. Green Revolution was in two phases. Phase 1 was from mid 1960s to mid 1970s, in which core crops were wheat and rice. However, it was limited to states like Punjab, Haryana, and Tamil Nadu. Phase 2 started in mid 1970s, which lasted to mid 1980s. It was extended to more crops and more states. Achievements of Green Revolution were a high increase in the food production, which led to self-sufficiency. Even after keeping the production for itself, farmers were able to sell it in the market and thus there was marketable surplus as well. Price of food grains also declined due to bumper production and government was able to keep a buffer stock as well. This also led to an increase in the income of farmers. However, there were certain fears that were associated with Green Revolution, like it could increase the disparity between rich and poor farmers. HYV crops were more prone to attack by pest. But fortunately, these fears did not come true because of steps taken by government like timely availability of credit and subsidies which were given to farmers. Now, coming to subsidies, there is a big debate over subsidies in the Indian economy. On one side, economists say that Subsidies should be given as they are helpful for increasing the productivity, and it helps in giving an incentive for adoption of new technology. They feel that in the absence of subsidy, farmers will not be able to purchase costly inputs as farming continues to be a risky business in India. Whereas on the other side, people think that subsidies put a huge burden on government's finances. It has also been observed that a substantial amount of subsidy was actually not availed by farmers, but the benefits were given to fertilizer industry. So the question that arises here is, should subsidies be given or not? So after analyzing the topic in detail, experts reached the opinion that yes, subsidies should be given, but they should be closely monitored so that its benefits are enjoyed only by the farmers and not by fertilizer industry. Now, considering all the technical and institutional steps taken by governments, let's analyze what was the effect of these effects on Indian agriculture during 1950s to 1990s. As a result of these measures, productivity in the Indian agriculture increased. We became self sufficient, and the proportion of GDP contributed by agriculture declined, but still we can see that majority of population was deriving their livelihood directly or indirectly from the agricultural sector. So, in the nutshell, we can say that yes, these policies were helpful in increasing the productivity of agricultural sector, but the problem of disguised unemployment was still there in this core sector of Indian economy. Coming to the another sector, industrial sector. We all know that as a country develops, the share of industrial sector should increase. So developing a strong industrial base was priority of Indian government post independence. As we all know that India inherited a poor industrial sector from Britain, as the variety of industry was very low. It was largely confined to cotton and textile and jutes. There were only two iron and steel industry, one in Jamshedpur and the another one in Kolkata. We all are very well aware of the fact that Britain led to deindustrialization of Indian industry. So need of hour was to develop a strong industrial sector. So this task was given to public sector as there was lack of capital and skill with private entrepreneurs. There was a small size of market due to which public sector was the only one to invest and private sector did not have an incentive to invest. Also, there was a decision to develop Indian economy on socialist line, and public sector is the best way to adopt the socialist pattern of development. Keeping these points in mind, the commanding heights of the economy were given to the public sector. And this was very well visible in the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956, which divided industries in three categories: Schedule A, Schedule B, and Schedule C. Under Schedule A, all industries were exclusively owned by the state. Schedule B, private sector supplemented the public sector, but again state had the commanding role. It was only in Schedule C that remaining industries were given to the private sector. However, it was not free from controls. Licensing was introduced to keep a check on the private sector, and it was also introduced in order to promote industries in backward regions. Licensing was required in order to start a new industry or to expand the existing industry. However, it led to a license raj in Indian economy, as corruption was there in giving license, which led to delays in the projects. Thus, licensing was not fully successful. Another important point related to industrial sector was small scale industries, which was stressed by the Karve Committee in 1955. These industries are very important for development of an economy like India, where people have a small amount of capital to invest. A small scale industry is one in which the maximum investment is allowed up to 1 crore rupee. It is labor incentive and leads to regional development as a very limited amount of capital is required. However, these industries are like small fish in sea which have a fear from big fishes. So they required a shield from large firms. In order to protect these industries, the policy of reservation was started, in which concessions were given to these industries and products were exclusively reserved for them. Large industries were not allowed to produce all the products which were reserved for small scale industries. Now, coming to the third aspect, trade policy. India adopted the inward looking trade policy, that is, we imposed barriers on international trade which aimed at substituting the import with domestically produced goods. Now, the tools which were used to substitute imports were qualitative tools like tariffs, in which imported goods were made expensive by imposing high tariffs on them. Along with tariffs, we have quantitative tools like quota, in which a maximum amount of goods which can be imported was specified. Thus, tariff and quota led to import substitution as they discouraged imports from other countries. Now, let's critically analyze the effect of all these policies on the development of Indian economy with a special focus on industrial development. As stated above, that commanding heights of economy was given to public sector. However, the performance of public sector was not good and public sector firms incurred huge losses. Also, the license Raj led to corruption and delays in the starting up of industrial projects. Due to restriction on imports, there was lack of competition, due to which there was a quality compromise. However, there were some positive points as well, like land reforms, though not fully successful, and green revolution helped agriculture sector to flourish. The proportion of GDP contributed by industrial sector increased, but on the other hand, maximum proportion of people continue to be employed in the agricultural sector, which is not a good indicator. Our industrial sector was diversified. Small scale industries gave a chance to entrepreneurs to flourish, and domestic industries like automobile and electronics were also developed in Indian economy during this period. However, the question is still there whether inward looking policy and giving an important role to public sector prove to be fruitful or not. This question will be answered in the next chapter, which is economic reforms in India in 1991. Till then, thank you, goodbye, and have a good day.